look at what we're seeing now, and this is recent years, the medical studies of recent year, is what we thought was hard-coded DNA genetic mutation of inheritance of certain diseases, like heart disease. Oh, it runs in your family. It's going to continue running in your family. There's nothing you can do about it. That was the old belief. And now neuroscience is coming in and saying, it isn't hard coded in the DNA at all. It's if grandma processed the emotions in the same way as mom, they impacted the same organs because they had the same behaviors. So like alcoholism runs in the family. There's a genetic mutation. What we're seeing now is it's how we are parroting how our great grandparents and grandparents and parents, how they behaved in response to the traumas they were holding on to. And then we just mirrored what they were doing, and it impacted the same organs. Or we inherited the same distress on the same organs. And so it's changing the way the medical community is seeing disease.
That's interesting because now you can look at certain things and say, okay, this is totally different than what we thought. And one thing that comes to mind, or a few things that comes to mind, is like anxiety.
Yeah.
I can
Yeah.
see that being something that is within the family just because grandfather reacted this way to something, then his son reacted this way, then his son. So you have three generations reacting the same way. And maybe they all saw it as children, like, oh my God, I saw my dad react this way. He's reacting scared, so I'm going to react scared. And now I'm anxious.
Yeah.
Right? Am I on the right path there?
Yeah. It's our environment, what we see. It's also, if we think about, if grandma is pregnant with your mom, or our grandmother's pregnant with our mother, if grandma's very anxious, financial distress or relationships or something going on, maybe it's an unsafe community, and grandma's got anxiety, grandma is vibrating that into the womb, into the fetus of mom. And for all of us, our grandmother's traumas got shared with our mothers, with the fetus. Well, our mothers developed the eggs that fertilized us while mom was still a fetus in the womb. So you've got grandma going through this distress, sharing it with the baby. The baby develops the eggs. So we've got three generations experiencing distress, but only one of them knows what's really happening. The other two are inheriting it. So grandma having anxiety when she's pregnant is going to give a like behavior for mom to have anxiety. So I want to know the maternal lineage first. What was life like for your grandmother when you were pregnant? That's going to tell me a lot about what's going on in your body.
I've heard people ask the question, okay, tell me about your childhood, and then they'll ask about the side on the women.
Yeah.
Like, tell me about your grandmother, tell me about your mother, tell me about things like that. And I guess to your point where it's like, okay, if the trauma can be passed down that way, it's like, okay, let me see how it was passed down. Let me see your upbringing. Because as you mentioned, if you're pregnant and you're stressed, the baby is feeling stressed too, but they don't know where it's coming from. But the mother who's experiencing, for the most part, we hope, is understanding it. It's interesting when you put it through that lens, then you start to see, at least for me, things a little bit differently. It's like someone who's sensitive to being abandoned. Okay, what happened in their childhood or what happened to their parents? Oh, you know what? My mother was a single mother. She was left alone. Her parents didn't provide support. So she passed down that feeling of abandonment. Now the child grows up trying to connect with this mother, but because the mother is a single mother and she's always working, the abandonment is amplified. And now they begin to feel it and they begin to remember, oh my God, I felt this way for however long. And maybe when they get children, somewhere, somehow, someone has to make a choice to heal it. So, how do we do that and heal it?
Understanding the story, what I find is that when we really understand the story of who we are, and it's not just the traumas that we inherit, adverse childhood experiences plays a huge role. The CDC and Kaiser Permanente have done large studies on the impact of adverse childhood experiences and our ability in our physical health and our mental well-being as adults. And and also our um, the mortality rate. That adverse childhood experiences plays a huge role in our well-being. When we start to understand the big story and we understand it from a lens of compassion, it's easier for our body to reconcile that the traumas. It's easier for our body to feel at peace when we understand that we are not the victim so much as we are a a participant in the story of our life. And working with clients, when we reconcile that energy, there is such a relief. It's a visible auditory exhale that people have that lets go of that invisible trauma stone, and the person breathes differently, releasing the weight of that heaviness is very, very powerful.
Do you find that to be difficult for some people to do?
No, no. It's a slow process. And that's why I do so much on TikTok. I do demos on TikTok. People can watch to allow the mind to know that it's safe, that my methods are safe. So when someone comes up and we go to the black room and their younger self is sitting there, we come off the elevator and there's the 6-year old. The 6-year old has a message. The 6-year old wants the microphone and says, "Hey, this is what I need from you." Now we're developing a relationship with the attributes of the self. Because in fifth dimension, length, width, height, time, space, every version of us, every moment of us exists at the same time. Time's not linear, it's only linear in 3D. When we go to 4D, we can move up and down. We're not on a Gregorian calendar where we can only go forward. Fourth dimension, we can go backwards and forward. Fifth dimension, we add that extra variable. We can move about as a whole. So in addressing the 6-year-old's needs, we heal our own current age needs. They reconcile.
So if it's something that many of us can in without too much difficulty, and then we can work with someone like you to understand it, what do you think are some of the commonalities that maybe are preventing people from actually doing it then?
Shame.